Good evening and welcome to the first remote meeting of Wirral Planning Committee. My name's Stuart Kelly and I'm the chair of the committee. The meeting will be webcast and a record retained on the council website. My role is to ensure that the committee runs smoothly, having regards to procedure, behaviour and ethics. To explain who are with us online, planning officers, a highway engineer and an environmental health officer. They will present the applications and provide any technical advice that may be required. The council solicitor, she will give advice to the committee on procedural and legal matters that may arise. There's also the minute taker and of course IT support. The elected members will consider the applications and collectively make the decisions. Voting will be by roll call. Each application will be introduced by the planning officers. Where there is a qualifying petition of 25 signatures or more, I will invite a representative of the petitioners to address the committee for 5 minutes. I will then invite the applicant or their agent to address the committee for 5 minutes. Statutory and local consultees may also address the committee. A ward councillor can also address the committee. Once representations have been made and following any questions of clarification from the committee, the Speaker may not participate in any debate that follows within the committee. The application will then be open to debate and discussion by members of the Planning Committee and we will then make a decision on the application. When making decisions, members may only have regard to material planning considerations. It's a matter for each member individually to balance these considerations and to decide what weight to give them. Members will also have regard to our local planning policies and to the National Planning Policy Framework and guidance. The order of tonight's agenda may be varied. A reminder for members, keep your microphone muted and your camera off until called to speak. Ensure that the chat function is accessible to you. Indicate that you want to speak by typing your request into the chat function. Turn on your camera and microphone prior to speaking. Turn them off again when you have finished. When a vote is to be taken, the solicitor will call your name. We now need to just check all members are present and their equipment is working correctly. When I call your name, could you turn on your camera and then your mic and confirm, please? Starting then with Bruce Berry.
Yeah, good evening, Chair.
Good evening. Andy Corkhill.
Yeah, I'm here, Stuart.
Thanks. George Davies. George Davies. Okay, we'll try and go back to George in a moment, see whether we've picked him up. Steve Foulkes.
Yes, Chair, present and correct.
Thank you. Samantha Frost.
Evening, Chair, yep, here.
Thank you. Steve Hayes.
Yes, Chair, present.
Thanks. Kathy Hodson.
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Thanks. Mary Jordan.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Brian Kelly.
Yes, Chair, I am present. Thank you.
Ian Lewis.
Yes, I'm present, Chair.
Paul Stewart.
Yes, I'm present, Chair. Thank you.
Stuart Whittingham.
I'm present.
Thank you. Irene Williams.
Yes, Chair, I'm present.
Okay. Let's try George Davis again. George, are you there? Okay. We don't seem to have George. I don't know whether IT can get in touch with him and see whether he's having having IT issues. We'll press on with what we can. So that's sorted. Item 1 on the agenda then, the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of March to approve the accuracy. If no one has an issue with that, no one typing in the... Okay, we've got Ian. Ian, do you want to say something on the minutes?
Yes, thank you, Chair. On item 96 of the minutes of the meeting of the 19th of March, I'm listed as declaring an interest as by being on the board of Magenta. I'm not on the board and I didn't declare an interest.
Okay. Okay, thanks for that. Minutes will need to be amended just to reflect that. With the exception of that then, we'll take the minutes as being approved. Item 2 is the Members' Code of Conduct, Declarations of Interest. Members of the committee are asked whether they have any personal or prejudicial interests in connection with any application on the agenda, and if so, to declare them and state the nature of the interest. Steve Foulkes.
Yes, Chair. Agenda item 4, Greenheys Road, by virtue of the fact that I'm a board director at Magenta. And I will leave the meeting. It's a prejudicial interest.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have 2 items. I'm proposing then to take item 4 first because we do have an applicant waiting in the lobby or potentially with us to address us. So we'll take first item 4, Greenheys Road, Liscard.
Okay, thank you through you.
Just one second.
Okay.
Oh, God. So Councillor Davies is stuck doing a Windows update and asks for a minute. Should we give him one? Yeah. Okay, Steve has left. Okay, so I mean we've given him a business. I suppose in the online world, not being able to get online is a bit like being stuck in traffic, isn't it? And my guess is that we probably should take it that he's stuck in traffic and will join us when he can. If members in the future, we'll probably say this at the end of the meeting, if we're going to ensure that we've signed on and joined the meeting in good time before the start, then we won't have issues of waiting. Okay, we'll move on with item 4, application of 5254 Greenheys Road, Liscard. I know we have Councillor Spore for the petitioners. Councillor Spore, can you hear us?
Hello, yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. And is the applicant or the applicant's agent online, and can they hear us?
Yes, I am. Thank you. I can hear you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll ask the planning officer to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So planning permission is sought for the demolition of existing buildings and for the erection of a part 2-storey, part 3-storey building that will house a 53-unit independent living retirement residential scheme, together with associated car parking and hard and soft landscaping. The vacant buildings on site have previously been used as residential care homes. Victoria Central Hospital is located to the north and west of the site, with residential properties adjacent to the site on Leominster Road and Greenheys Road. Access to the site will be via Greenheys Road. The proposal will provide for 53 extra care units, providing supported accommodation with 24-hour off-site care. There will be 45 one-bed units and 8 two-bed units. The scheme will be 100% affordable. The north-east facing elevation is some 26 metres away from the rear elevations of properties fronting Leominster Road. This exceeds the minimum distance of 23 metres that would be expected where 3-storey development faces 2-storey development. The site is also the subject of a tree preservation order that was made in 1992. These proposals will require the removal of 32 individual trees and a small group of 6 trees located in the eastern corner of the site. The application is accompanied by an arboricultural impact assessment and a proposed landscaping plan, both of which have been assessed and appraised by the Council's own tree officer. The protected trees across the site are categorised in line with the British standard from A, B, C and U, with Category A trees being highly desirable for retention and U being unfeasible due to structural or physiological defects. The one Category A tree is to be retained within the scheme. Of the 22 Category B trees, which are those considered to be desirable for retention, 7 will be removed. The majority of trees to be removed fall within Category C, 18 in total out of 25 Category trees. All 7 Category U trees will be removed. The Council's tree officer is satisfied that the trees being removed are those that represent the least value to the TPO and to the wider amenity of the area. The removal of these trees will also allow for better management of the trees to be retained within development, thereby securing the long-term health and future of those trees across the site. It is also proposed to replant 19 new trees within the site, including 1 extra heavy standard tree and 10 heavy standard trees, ensuring that the replanting will have some immediate effect within the development. There will therefore be a net loss of 13 trees across the site. Those with the most important amenity value, including many trees along the site boundaries, will be retained, including those considered to be the best trees within the site along the boundary with Greenheys Road. In conclusion, the application represents the redevelopment of a brownfield site within the primarily residential area that will provide for 53 affordable extra care apartments which will contribute to the borough's housing figures. The loss of some trees is compensated for with replacement planting within the site that also provides for better management of retained trees protected by the TPO. On balance, the provision of affordable housing on a brownfield site with good links to local amenities and public transport is considered to weigh in favour of the proposed development. The application is considered to be acceptable in terms of both local and national planning policy and is recommended for approval. There is a qualifying petition of objection in connection with this application.
Okay, thanks for that. We will now hear then from the spokesperson for the petitioners. That's Councillor Spohr. If you could turn on your mic and camera.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh,
Okay, so you will have 5 minutes as petitioner to address the committee.
Chair. Good evening, everybody. The lead petitioners, Cole Holsworth and Charlotte Holsworth, have asked me to speak on their behalf, the residents and as a Liscard ward councillor. To be clear, residents are not against this development. They acknowledge and welcome a development which will provide homes for people who may require additional support and wish to live independently. However, we seek reassurance that the developers will be sympathetic and respectful for the community of which they will be part. I will now list the concerns that residents have regarding the development. There are concerns with the size of the development and its impact on amenity. The development will be of 3-storey height, which will cause loss of view for certain residents in Leominster Road. There is concern that the development will cause an increase in noise and artificial night light. Residents note and acknowledge condition 5, that an external lighting scheme is to be installed and that should protect ecology and excessive light spill onto habitat. Residents are concerned that the development will cause an increase of traffic through Leominster Road and the surrounding residential roads, and they fear that their roads will be used for heavy construction vehicles to gain access to the site. The level of parking provision at 25 spaces has been deemed as acceptable by planning officers for the development. However, residents are very concerned that there will be overspill parking in an area where residents already have issues with parking provision, especially during the evenings and weekends when parking in their streets is already at capacity. The main objection to the proposed development is the removal of 32 trees, which are understood to be safeguarded by a blanket tree protection order, which is reference 169A.001. The land is an established ecosystem and haven for wildlife with many variety of trees and hedgerow, including ash, elm, sycamore racer, silver birch, horse chestnut, white beam, goat willow, holly, and offer habitat for many different species of birds and animals, including woodpecker, bats, wood pigeon, sparrow, blue tits, wren, squirrels, hedgehog, fox and crows. Residents and the wider community have petitioned against the loss of these trees, and I believe that the petition has achieved 139 online signatures and 62 paper signatures, which obviously demonstrates the level of objection towards the loss of trees. There is a document in the planning bundle with no date that acknowledges that it may be necessary to remove some trees to carry out development of the land. However, this decision can only be made through approval and consent by planning authority under provision of the Act. But we believe that there has been no proper reassessment to allow this to happen. The trees are described in a hierarchy of merit value, categories of low, moderate or high quality, and are described as having limited value. We do not agree. Each tree, undeniably, has an essential and positive impact upon the ecosystem and biodiversity, including, of course, air quality. In terms of value, how do we value trees? By species, or should it be for their worth to biodiversity? And if so, would the trees be graded differently? The tree assessment does not describe the actual environmental impact with regard to the loss of every tree upon our precious ecosystem. Trees that produce quantities of O2 protect carbon release and contribute immensely to health and well-being and air quality for life. The developer has put forward plans to landscape the area and plant some trees. However, there still will be a loss of at least 13 trees with no mitigation measures in place, when in fact in reference to the National Planning Policy Framework, the development should strive to achieve a biodiversity net gain. It seems to me that replacement tree planting should be a condition in line with current best practice and to adhere to the emerging Wirral tree strategy, which we hope will be in a position to be signed off at the end of this week. Although planting a replacement tree cannot be compensation for the loss of a mature tree, conditions to ensure that we plant trees for lost trees should be included in any planning outcome, and the number of replacement trees should take into account the size of the tree to be replaced to mitigate carbon capture value. This is of particular concern as in our local area we know that there are issues with air pollution and air quality. We need our trees.
About 1 minute left.
Okay, if the committee approve this development and the footprint of the building works do not allow for additional tree planting, I'm sure that there are many suitable locations that can be found to plant replacement trees. For example, there are gaps in tree pattern along the perimeter of Central Park alongside GREENHEYS ROAD. To safeguard the trees during the development, it is noted and acknowledged that there are conditions and detailed measures in place to safeguard trees against damage. It is really important this is retained and observed, but ask that an urgent tree protection order is put in place to ensure that the protection of existing trees. Furthermore, we'd like to see a full enforcement component included in the condition. And finally, it is nearly 2 years since the bat survey was completed, and at the time bats were reported to be seen foraging in the proposed development site. Considering the length of time that has been passed since this report, and given that bat surveys should be completed annually based on the understanding that bats can move their roost every year, an up-to-date survey needs to be carried out urgently by an experienced and qualified ecologist to reassess and to ensure that there are no bat roosts currently in the area, including the derelict buildings. Thank you. I hope that the Planning Committee will consider resident objections and their concerns.
Okay, thanks for that. Can I ask members of the Planning Committee if they have any questions, to indicate if they have any questions for me to call? No? Okay, thank you for that. I'll now invite the applicant or the applicant's agent to join us.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Yeah, if you could give us your name and tell us who you represent, and you two will have 5 minutes to speak to the application.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My name is Justin Cove. I'm a planning consultant at Hive Land and Planning. We're the agent acting for the joint applicants on this application, who are the NHS and Amwell Partnerships.
Okay, you have 5 minutes to address us, that's it.
Thank you. On behalf of the joint applicants, I'd like to support the officer's recommendation to approve this planning application. The report and the presentation you just heard clearly set out all the key issues and demonstrate that the proposals are acceptable, taking all planning considerations into account. The applicants are very aware of the concerns that have been expressed regarding the loss of some trees across the site, but I'd like to take this opportunity to reassure members of the Planning Committee that the scheme has been heavily influenced by this. The site is covered by a blanket TPO, but it has been in place for a number of years without review, and so in recognition of this, a formal request for pre-application advice was submitted to Wirral Council. The request was accompanied with an up-to-date tree survey, which then provided the Council's tree officer the opportunity to work closely with the applicant's design team and arboricultural consultant to ensure that the scheme's designs minimise the loss of any quality trees on the site. The siting of the building was therefore heavily influenced by the advice received from the tree officer at pre-application stage, and the application was only submitted once we knew that the tree officer could support not only the loss of trees, but the replacement planting strategy as well. The replacement trees will collectively be of a better quality than those that are to be removed, and a conscious and successful effort has also been made to minimise the loss of trees along the GREENHEYS ROAD frontage, which have the highest amenity value for the local area. The applicant has therefore done everything they can to retain the balance between the loss of trees across the site and ensuring that the scheme can be delivered and fulfil its intended use as an extra care scheme, bringing a vacant brownfield site back into use. To give you some more background, Annual Partnerships will build the scheme and Magenta Living will then manage it going forward. Magenta is the largest registered provider of social housing in Wirral and they're currently on site with 8 projects in the borough which will deliver a total of 157 affordable homes. In addition to their new build programme, Magenta's stock portfolio in Wirral includes over 1,500 homes for supported accommodation, the majority of which has been in management for over 15 years. In respect of this scheme, the letting strategy has been agreed with the NHS and Wirral's Adult Social Care Department, and applications from potential residents will be assessed on a needs basis with priority given to local residents. Magenta completed their first new build extra care in 2017 and understand how schemes of this nature can change lives. I thought I'd share a direct quote of their residents. From day one, everyone has helped my way of life improve tremendously. The way the staff support you is fantastic. They are always there to help and their professionalism and good humour is excellent. In the 9 months I have been here, the accommodation, the companionship and the facilities have been brilliant. I really enjoy eating in the restaurant, the regular evening bingo sessions, the trips out and the many other social events. Moving to Hartley Place has given me a new lease of life. My health and mobility have improved and I am looking forward to the future. So alongside the significant social benefits this affordable extra care scheme will bring, is that it will also make a positive contribution towards housing supply in Wirral, as a 5-year supply can't currently be demonstrated. As you'll know, the council are currently consulting on the local plan, and the preferred option being put forward is for urban regeneration with no greenbelt release. To be able to defend this strategy throughout the remainder of the local plan process requires 2 things. Firstly, the delivery of housing on brownfield sites, and secondly, building at higher densities when compared to historic trends. This scheme would fulfil both objectives and will therefore help the council to better defend the green belt in Wirral throughout the remainder of the local plan process. Finally, when considering the overall planning balance, the scheme will deliver many significant benefits, including much needed affordable housing, the regeneration of a vacant brownfield site, and the social health and wellbeing benefits for local residents. Whilst it is accepted that some trees will need to be removed, they are largely low quality and the replacement trees will be of a much higher quality, and so any harm in this regard is considered to be minimised as a result. The many significant benefits the scheme brings forward far outweigh any perceived harm. Excuse me.
You have 1 minute.
NHS and Annual Partnerships as joint applicants politely ask members of the Planning Committee to support the office's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I'll just ask members of the committee if they have any questions that they would like to ask. Ian Lewis. Hi.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask the agent, I'm not clear from the report, you mentioned that you're acting on behalf of Anwil Construction and NHS Property Services, but you've made reference to Magenta. Who is your client exactly? And if I could ask the Chair why Magenta isn't listed as an applicant?
Shall I go first on that one?
Yes, please. Yeah.
NHS are the landowner. Annual Partnerships, if you like, are the middle party. So they are currently in a partnership with the NHS, who are the landowner. Annual Partnerships will then take on, or in effect purchase the site from the NHS. They will construct the building and the facility and deliver it, and then hand it over to Magenta, who will then occupy the building. So at this present time, the relationship is NHS as current landowner and Annual Partnerships, or construction. And to confuse matters, Annual they rebranded during the course of this application from Annual Construction to Annual Partnerships. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, Ian. Okay, let me bring in now then Steve Hayes.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, got you.
Yeah. Hi, Justin. Thanks for your report. Yeah, basically, I'm a little bit disappointed that we're not getting a sort of like with like in terms of tree replacements. And also, I mean, there's going to be a massive, let's say, canopy difference between the trees that are lost and the ones that are going to be replaced. I mean, and even if the trees sort of that you replace grow to full size, have you any idea what the canopy difference of loss would actually be?
In a measurement sense,
yes.
I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to that question. Just in terms of the overall numbers and the categories, we do know those statistics, but not the physical size of each individual tree compared new to old. But obviously, when the new trees come in, while some are more mature and of a heavier standard, they will obviously grow over time. So it will be a moving feast in terms of what's replaced.
Okay, thanks for that. Nobody else has indicated they have a question, so thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the committee. I think Ian asked a question, which he directed at me. Probably I'm going to redirect it to Matthew. I suppose Magenta aren't on the applicant list because they're not the applicant, Matthew.
That's right, Chair, and I think Justin at the agent for the application has explained the sort of rationale and the process behind that. So at the moment, the applicants are Annual Construction or now Annual Partnership, who are working in partnership with the landowner, NHS. They will develop out the site, and then once the development is complete, Magenta will occupy the site and will manage it. And will provide the housing on site.
Okay, thanks for that. Stuart Whittingham.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was hoping to get a question into the agent. So I think I just missed it.
Was it that's probably my fault for being too. Is Mr. Cove still there? Is he happy to take another question from a member?
Yes, of course. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. So in terms of the tree replacements, is it going to be an equal number of trees replaced to the ones that have been removed, or are you looking to replace the number of trees, remove a greater number of trees?
The net loss will be 13. But what right. I think there's for the landscaping strategies you're working for trees to be healthy. I think quite a number of these trees are basically too close to each other, and so the landscaping strategy allows sufficient room around each tree to allow it to flourish. So once you factor in the siting of buildings, the associated car park, and the landscaping strategy has been carefully planned around that. But I think the point I'm trying to re-emphasise is the quality side of things as well, because obviously the new trees going in are of a much better quality than the majority of trees that are being removed.
Actually, supplementary, please, Stuart.
Go on, Stuart.
Yeah. Will the applicant be happy to replace the number of trees elsewhere? Off-site?
Well,
I don't
sorry, through you, Chair, if I could answer that question. Off-site provision of replacement planting couldn't be done as a condition or as part of this application. It would have to be done because it's outside of the red edge of the application site. So it would have to be done by way of a legal agreement, which we don't have we don't have that in place.
Okay. Okay, Stuart, that for now. Yeah, we'll debate that in due course. Bruce Berry, do you wish to ask a question of the applicant or a question?
No, question of the planning officer, please.
Okay. Mr. Cove, thank you for your contribution. And I'll open it now to members, and we'll start with Bruce Berry.
Thank you. There was mention of the BAT survey, that it was out of date, 12 months out of date. Can you comment on that, please?
Yes, so through you, Chair, as part of the assessment of this application, we consulted with our ecological advisors, the Merseyside Environmental Advisory Service, and we had a response from them. So a bat survey report was undertaken in June 2018, and it was supplemented by an ecology letter statement that was dated the 20th of September 2019. So as part of that that update letter and the phase 1 habitat survey and bat survey which were undertaken, MEAS have said that there are 2 trees on site with bat roost potential. So as part of the surveys and the updated letter that was provided, MEAS have confirmed that bat survey of the buildings on site did not identify any evidence of bat roosts, and it was their conclusion that no further bat surveys were required for the application.
Okay, so shall I, Kathy Hodson?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Matthew, are you and the tree surgeon happy that the screening on the side of GREENHEYS ROAD would be adequate to provide an aesthetically pleasant vista for those neighbours that will be directly affected?
Okay, so through you, Chair, as members will know, the right to a view is not something that we can take into consideration when we're determining planning applications. And I think what's informed this application, and certainly the discussions that the applicant had at pre-app stage with the council and the tree officer, the council's own tree officer, is that this is quite an old TPO. It was put in place nearly 30 years ago, and it hasn't really been properly managed. So without proper management, the trees will ultimately suffer. And I think, as the agent for the applicant has outlined, by thinning out some of the trees on the site, it allows some of the better quality trees to prosper, and thereby to increase their longevity and their long-term future for the site. Now, when we first looked at this site, Eric, our tree officer, and council officers were very clear that the trees with the highest amenity value were those that were along the boundary with GREENHEYS ROAD, and all of those trees are to be retained, with the exception of a small number of trees, a group of trees which are classified as not being of good standard anyway, in the western corner of the site, essentially adjacent to number 50 GREENHEYS ROAD on your plans. So on balance, there is, as we've outlined, a net loss of 13 trees across the site. But in terms of the management of the retained trees and the 19 replacement trees that are being brought in, and the standard of those trees, we're satisfied that the landscape value, the amenity value, and the wildlife value of the site is still good.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll bring Ian Lewis in now, and then Brian Kelly kick off the debate. Ian.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Can I just go back to the earlier comment? I'm still not clear as to why Magenta, who are clearly going to be taking over this site, are not listed within either as an agent or as an applicant. Because if I was to declare an interest as a councillor, unless they're listed, as Councillor Foulkes has done and he's left the meeting, how would we know who the ultimate occupier is if Magenta have signed a contract with this particular agent? So I'm not clear from an information point of view why Magenta would not be listed on this application. And secondly, there was a discrepancy over the number of trees to be lost. The report on point 3.12.1 makes reference to the removal of 30 trees. The planning manager made reference in his remarks to the loss of 38 trees in total. Can we have some clarity as to how many trees are actually being lost? I'm not talking net loss, I'm talking the total number of trees that are going to be removed as part of this application, please.
Yes, so through you, Chair. The first question is quite simple. Magenta are not at this point either the applicant or the agent for the application, so therefore they're not listed in the documentation for this application. Ultimately, though, they will be the end user of the development, but they're not the applicant and they're not the agent. That's why they're not listed. In terms of the number of trees, so there are 32 individual trees that are being lost and a group of 6. So there are 38 trees that will be taken away from the site.
Ian, you want to come back?
Yes, please. I'm sorry to labour the point, Chair, but if what the planning manager says is correct, and I have no reason to doubt that, and Magenta are not listed as the applicant or the agent, why in that case has Councillor Foulkes had to leave the meeting by declaring an interest? And secondly, in terms of this, my second question, we are now talking 38 trees, so the report where it says 30 trees is incorrect. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, through you, Chair, I can confirm that it's 32 individual trees and a group of 6. So the number of lost trees is 38. I don't know if Cecilia wants to come back on the planning solicitor about why Councillor Foulkes has had to declare an interest.
Yeah, well, the declaration of interest is always a personal matter for the members if they feel that they have an interest that needs to be declared. It's quite probable, I don't know the actual reason other than the fact that Councillor Foulkes did say he had a prejudicial interest as is in his role as Magenta. He's obviously been aware that they will be involved at some stage in the future and has taken that decision to declare an interest.
Okay. Let's bring Brian Kelly in. Brian?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, like most applications that come before the Planning Committee, there's no simple answer and there's often arguments for and against. On this particular application, I think on the negative side, if I've still got my figures correct, there's an overall loss of 13 trees. But looking at the application overall, we're talking about an extra 53 new houses on a brownfield site, which are 100% affordable. And going back to the trees, again, my understanding is that the replacement trees will be of a better quality than much of the trees that are there now. So we're talking about a regeneration of a brownfield site, which in itself will take pressure off the greenbelt land. And we're talking about one of the people responsible behind this application, the NHS Property Services Limited, who I would think that particularly in this day and age should be given as much support as possible in issues like this. So overall, Chair, even though there might appear to be a negative with the overall loss of 13 trees, I think the arguments in favour of the application very much outweigh that. So I'm certainly minded at this stage to support the application. Thank you, Chair.
That's fine. Stuart Whittingham.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'm minded to support the application on the basis that it's providing much needed affordable extra care facilities, which are desperately needed here in Wirral. However, I must I've a bit disappointed in terms of we didn't agree a legal agreement in terms of replacing the number of trees, like for like. even off-site, because it's been clear, the direction members want to take the council for a while in terms of response to the climate emergency. So I just want to register that disappointment, and I would ask, if possible, if the application's approved tonight, whether not, as an act of good faith, we'd be able to negotiate some provision of replacement trees off-site. I think that goes some way to help, address some of the concerns addressed by Councillor Spore.
Okay, thanks for that. Any further member contributions at this point? As Brian Kelly suggested, as I say in my opening remarks all the time, I beg your pardon, Irene Williams, would you like to?
I just want to back up what Stuart was saying about replacing the number of trees that would be lost, even if it's off-site. But other than that, I do think it's quite a good application. It's sad that we've got to lose those trees, though. So I just want to back up what Stuart was saying about the trees. It's an environmental issue. We can't really afford to lose trees. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Can I just come back on that, Chair? I think what members need to understand is that the majority of those trees that are being identified to be removed from the scheme are in poor health and are likely to fail within the next 10 years anyway. And we're getting 19 replacement trees, which are of a significant standard, and environmentally and ecologically will be better for the site in the long term.
Thanks for that. Ian Lewis, you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Chair. Now that we're into the debate on the merits or otherwise of the application, can I begin by thanking Councillor Spore for the representation that she made on behalf of the residents of Leominster Road and the wider community. I think the comments that she made were some of the best that we've heard at a planning committee as to the concerns of residents on the specific detail of the loss of habitat if this application is approved this evening. In terms of observations, Chair, until we get to the vote, I'm on the understanding that a tree preservation order has no time limit. The fact it was granted 28 years ago. Therefore, the fact it was granted 28 years ago is irrelevant. The reference that I think it was the planning officer, so forgive me if it wasn't, made to the being a very poor management of the tree preservation orders, that's not, I don't feel that's particularly relevant. I think it reflects badly on the council, because we've granted tree preservation orders to protect these trees and we failed to ensure that tree preservation order is maintained. So that's a negative point for the council. It doesn't necessarily justify removal of all of 38 trees. I think also, Chair, the net loss of 13 trees in Wallasey contrasts with the news that we had a few months ago, where the government had given the council several £1 million to pay for 1,700 new trees in the urban area as part of the Urban Tree Fund. It seems perverse that we're getting money to plant new trees, while at the same time we're taking a decision to remove existing trees. And I also think, Chair, as a final comment or observation, I think it would have been perfectly reasonable to expect a so-called social landlord who is behind this application to have recognised the value of complying with tree preservation orders and to have done a little bit more work to ensure that trees on this site are not lost. Thank you, Chair.
See you. Okay. Yeah, as Brian Kelly suggested, what we always try and do when we look at these applications is to balance the various competing themes as they arise. I did look back at the tree preservation order that was put on the site. It was a blanket one, and I agree with what Ian Lewis has said. It was recognised even at that time that not all the trees on the site had particular merit, but the order makes the point that as a mass they have a considerable impact on the local area, and that TPO was put in place, and the existing development on site, I think the points made within the report itself, the existing development fits around the trees like a jigsaw piece. So clearly some thought was given to the previous application on that. This new application that we have in front of us is obviously larger than the one that's currently on site. It's 3 stories. It positions itself toward the southern boundary. And in terms of what the petitioners have said to us, obviously they're concerned about the general massing of it, but our policies in terms of separation distances are met. Similarly, I think our policies in relation to car parking standards for the type of application it is also met. I share the concerns that members have put forward about the loss of trees for the general area, because that was the purpose of the TPO to start with. And I do think that potentially the character of the area could well be diminished by allowing the development to go forward without compensatory tree planting, particularly as the site itself borders an area that could well take additional tree planting, if you like, to widen the scope of it. If we do approve the application, it will in effect remove the tree preservation order that's currently in place. Will the new trees be subject to a TPO, Matthew, or will it will we effectively be lifting the tree preservation order for the site?
Well, the trees on site that are to be retained and are currently subject to the TPO will remain protected by the TPO. The new trees won't be, but they could potentially be added to the TPO at some point in the future. And when you look at the TPO and the reason that the TPO is put in place, you have to, there are a number of criteria that have to be met, and new young trees probably don't meet that criteria at this stage, but they will in the future. But essentially the rest of the site will still be covered by the TPO.
Thanks for that. Well, I think what I'm minded to do, having heard that committee is potentially divided on the matter, is I'll put a refusal in front of the committee and test committee's views on refusal based upon the loss of character in the area by virtue of the loss of TPO trees, bearing in mind the TPO was put on to protect the character of that site, and also Chancery Arm on an inadequate provision of landscaping given the net loss of trees that we've heard about. Let me put that potential motion in the chat function. Okay. Brian, I've seen your notes, and I was chatting up to the point where I was going to put a motion before the committee. Obviously, if it fails, I'll bring you back. Okay, so I'm going to move then that the application is refused for the following reason. The proposal has failed to adequately take into account the TPO order number 169 and therefore does not comply with policy HS4 criteria for new housing development as referenced by policy HS7 sheltered housing policy. Specifically, the requirements of paragraph 2 in that the proposal would result in a detrimental change to the character of the area by virtue of the loss of TPO protected trees, and paragraph 4 in that there is inadequate provision of appropriate landscaping and boundary treatment which relates the development to its surroundings, paying particular attention to the maintenance of existing natural features and vegetation, i.e. the TPO protected trees. Okay. Can everyone see that now in the chat box? Ian Lewis?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to second that refusal, please. My concern is that while we're talking about a certain number of trees that will be planted by the applicant or their agent or the company that they're working for, we know from tree planting that roughly 1 in 3 trees that are planted survive. So we are talking quite a significant net loss over a period of years before any future TPO is imposed. So I'd be quite happy to second your refusal, Chair.
Okay. Any other members wish to make contribution now they've seen the proposal? No. Okay. Let's vote on that. That's been moved by myself and seconded by Ian Lewis. Let me just okay. So we can prepare to vote then. Voting will be for, against or abstaining on the motion. The solicitor will call your name to hear your vote. Members should only cast a vote if they have heard the planning officer's presentation and the debate in relation to this matter in full and have not had any technical difficulties during this item. In the event that you have had problems hearing the discussion, you should not vote and indicate not voting when called. Okay, I'll hand over to the solicitor to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. So if I'm going to call out each member's name in turn, and if you could state whether you vote for or against or you're abstaining in relation to the motion to refuse this application. So Councillor Berry?
I'm voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Corkhill?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Davies?
Abstain.
Can I just clarify that, Councillor Davies? Is that on the basis that you didn't hear the full debate?
I haven't heard hardly any of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Councillor Frost?
Against.
Councillor Hayes?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hodson? Councillor Hodson?
Oh. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Kenny?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis?
For.
Councillor Stuart?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Whittingham?
Against.
Thank you. And Councillor Williams?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, thank you. I'll just take a moment now to just confirm the voting. So I think I've got nobody's challenged the record that I put forward. So the voting was that 7 for refusal, 4 against, 1 abstention and 1 not voting. So that refusal is carried.
Okay, thanks for that. Without a doubt, their application has been refused for the reasons given by 7 votes to 4, 1 abstention, 1 not voting. Okay, now we turn then to item 3 on our agenda, which is computer. Which is Vacant Shop at 67 King Street, EGREMONT. Can I just check? First? Irene, if you could turn your camera off.
Sorry.
Can I just check that we have Councillor Williamson online with us?
Hi, Chair. Yeah, I'm here.
Thanks a lot. I'll call you in when required. If you can ask the planner to introduce the report, please.
Councillor Kelly, can we just check that Councillor Foulkes is back in?
Good point. Thanks, Cecilia and Stuart. Steve Foulkes, are you back with us?
I think Councillor Foulkes is back in now. Can you just
Okay,
check?
I'm back in the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Thanks, Steve. We're just moved to item 3, 67 King Street, and Matthew is now going to introduce the report. Thanks.
Okay, thank you through you, Chair. So this planning application is seeking the change of use of this building to a 7-bedroom house in multiple occupation. The proposals have been amended since they were first submitted to reduce the number of bedrooms proposed from 8 to 7. The existing shop front will be removed and bricked up with a new front door inserted into this elevation, together with a new window that will serve a ground floor bedroom. A rear dormer has already been constructed in connection with additional accommodation proposed within the roof space. It's proposed that there will be 1 ensuite bedroom on the ground floor, together with a communal kitchen and dining area. There will be 3 further bedrooms on the first floor, 2 of which will be ensuite and 1 with access to a shared bathroom. 2 further ensuite bedrooms on the second floor and 1 ensuite bedroom in the roof space, which will also house a second communal kitchen and dining space. There is no off-street parking proposed within this development. 7 cycle parking stands and a communal bin store are proposed at the rear of the property. The development proposed seeks to fulfil a need for low-cost residential accommodation, and the proposals would bring back into use a long-term vacant property, which will have some beneficial effect on the appearance within the street scene. The site is located within a sustainable location with easy access to shops and public transport. The application is recommended for approval. There is no qualifying petition of objection in connection with this application. Chair, I think your microphone is on.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Screens all around me. I'll see which one I'm looking at. Okay, this item was taken out of delegation by a member. I can invite Councillor Williamson.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'm going to start by reading out a statement provided to me by Maria Kershaw, who's a member of EGREMONT and Tenants Association, the Voice of EGREMONT and Tenants Association, which is a fantastic group that concentrates its work on King Street and the surrounding area to clean it up. Fantastic community advocates. And she says, as a close neighbour to this address, but mostly as a member of the Voice of EGREMONT and Tenants Association, I'd like to ask, firstly, do we not already have enough HMOs in our small area? But whichever plan may be approved, I'm just going to go on to our objections. Can the decision makers please consider that included in these plans should be safe access by all tenants to yards at the rear of the building and provided with alley gate keys by the landlord? As a community group, we've spent the past 2 years trying to improve our area.
Jeanette, can I ask you to turn your camera on, please?
Oh, sorry.
It is a webcast meeting, so...
I do apologise. Right, bear with me. Right. Okay. So, all right, should I start again, or are you happy for me to pick up where I left off?
I'm happy for you to pick up.
Okay. Okay. So I'm talking about the work that the community group have done. They do weekly litter picks, alley cleaning, fundraising to install a number of railings and floor planters in the King Street area, and they liaise with various council departments, councillors and local landlords to help them with their efforts. One of the biggest concerns is especially that in that area, the amount of bins left on pavements at the front of the premises. We feel that to add to these numbers would be detrimental to the already neglected parts of King Street when we're all working really hard to improve it. I've got some of my own concerns as well, Chair. I'd just like to run through very briefly. One is about the high density of HMOs in EGREMONT and Liscard. I do really feel that in the more deprived areas of the borough, we've seen an absolute plethora in HMOs and the associated problems that come with HMOs. I don't think it's part of our overall aspirations for the borough to have very low cost and I think low quality housing that are concentrated in specific areas. The local plan currently is giving us an opportunity to look at the density of HMOs in certain areas, and I feel that we should work really hard on building in a policy around HMOs that doesn't see them all concentrated in the parts of the borough which I feel are adding up to problems that already exist there. There's a lot of community goodwill within King Street and around EGREMONT. I feel that they're working really, really hard with the community and with landlords to improve their area. And I don't think putting in another HMO on King Street will actually help them to do that. And I've also got some real concerns around public health. The crisis that we're in currently surely cannot be helped by communal bathrooms and communal kitchens. And I know we're not bound to take into account public health considerations, unlike Scotland maybe. I do feel that it would be absolutely unconscionable for us to continue with just allowing HMOs to spring up in parts of the borough which has pre-existing problems already around poverty and deprivation in a time where we've actually got an unprecedented public health crisis which cannot be helped by shared living areas such as bathrooms and kitchens. And I guess this plea is just one around, I think we need to put the brakes on HMOs at the minute. We have got the local plan in action. We will be looking at that as part of the local plan. And I just don't think that HMOs are adding to the aspirations that we all have as councillors for the borough. I would like very much not to have another HMO in EGREMONT. I don't feel that it's fair. I feel that there's quite enough there, and I'd very much like to recommend that this application is refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Stuart. Open to members then. Sam Frost.
Thank you, Chair. The question I'd like to raise is around Councillor Williamson's point on communal health. I'd be interested, please, could we see the proposed floor plan for the property? It's particularly in relation to the rooms that are not going to be en suite. My question is, first of all, do they have a sink in the rooms? And second of all, what is the distance between the bedroom and the shared bathroom facility? I know it's not something for right now, but in terms of what we've been working towards on the planning subcommittee, distance from the bathroom has been a key area that we've talked about. So yeah, they would be my two questions. Can we see a floor plan? Do the non-en-suites have sinks, and what is the distance for the non-en-suites from the bathroom facilities? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Matthew?
Yep, just bear with me. Right, I'm going to try attempt to share my screen with you. So fingers crossed. Okay. So, are members seeing that?
Well,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Okay. So I'll use my my mouse to describe what you can see on the screen. So this plan here to the left is the ground floor, and as you can see, there's a one bedroom here that has an ensuite facility, a toilet, a basin, and a shower. And then you've got the dining room and the kitchen with the cycle store and the bin store at the back. Then we move up to the first floor, which is this part here. And so on the first floor, we've got bedroom 2, which again is en suite with a basin, a toilet and a shower. Bedroom 3, which also has a shower, a basin and a toilet. And then bedroom 4, this is the only room of the 7 that doesn't have en suite. So the bedroom is here, and the shower, basin and toilet is here, and I will measure that distance for you in a moment. And then we go up to the second floor, 2 bedrooms on this floor, again both of those en suite with shower, basin and toilet. And then up in the roof space, so the new 3rd floor is bedroom 7, again with an ensuite, which you can see here, and then a second shared kitchen and living space. I'm just going to have to open a different app to measure the distance for you, but just bear with me a second. So plans list, King Street, floor plan. So the distance from the door of the bedroom to the door of the bathroom is meters. Just bear with me a second, I need to set the scale. To 100. So that distance is 11.5 meters.
Okay.
Are you okay for me to remove the plan now?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's bring in Kathy Hodson. Kathy?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, can't see you. Turn your camera on.
On. I can see me in the bottom of the screen. Can you see me?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can now.
Yes,
Right.
yeah.
Going on from what Councillor Williamson said, especially now, where we're in a position where people are going to have to be in lockdown, it's bad enough being in lockdown in a one-bedroom flat, but if we're going to ask people to possibly self-isolate in a bedroom, can you tell me how big is the bedroom? Is it big enough for a double bed? Is there separate seating area? I mean, for instance, if you had to self-isolate and all you had is your bedroom and sat on your bed for 12 weeks, I mean, you'd just go stir crazy, wouldn't you? And also, going on from that, it says in one of the conditions, condition 3, that the house is, should hereby approved shall not be occupied by more than 7 people. But how would you police how many people lived in it? I mean, for instance, okay, if you're the single bed and somebody wanted somebody else in it, you could probably get a bunk bed in, although you'd probably never get them up the stairs. But if it was a double bed and all the rooms are big enough for double beds, which I would hope that they would be, but that in itself would mean that you could have 14 people living in an HMO that is supposedly designed for 7. I very much agree with Jeanette Williamson's view in terms of whether or not we should be looking, especially now with coronavirus and any future pandemics, whether or not we should be looking at HMOs as a valid option for habitable places for human beings to live in.
Okay, so through you, Chair. The smallest bedroom is bedroom 7, which is right at the top of the property, up in the roof space, and the floor area for that is 10.4 square metres. It will get a double bed in it, but it doesn't really have additional seating areas in there. And then the remainder of the bedrooms are anything from 13.5 square metres up to 19.6 square metres. Yes, they all do have double beds in them, and what's shown as a desk and a chair and some wardrobes.
Okay, thanks for that. Can we have Steve Hayes now, please?
Yes, can you hear me? Yeah, I just want to pick up on something Councillor Williamson said. I do agree. I feel that these HMOs in concentrated areas does have a cumulative negative impact on the area, and I think it's something that I wish we could sort of solve for the future. But what I wanted to make a question to Matthew was the kitchen dining area on the first floor, is that for one flat, is it? And the second question is if that is the case, the top floor where the other kitchen living room is, that seems very, very small for the rest of the occupants. Have I interpreted that correctly?
Well, there are 2 shared kitchens and dining, 2 shared kitchen stroke dining room spaces. The first one is on the ground floor towards the rear of the ground floor, and then there's a second one right at the top of the property on the 3rd floor. That's not intended as solely for use for bedroom 7. It is a shared area for the entire property. But obviously the people in bedrooms 5 and 6 would have to go up the stairs to use that, and presumably the people in 2 and 3 would have to go downstairs to use the facility on the ground floor.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. Stuart Whittingham.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question. So there's one room which has got a shared bathroom, which is a contradiction, isn't it? How can you just have a shared bathroom for one flat? And looking at the plan, that shared bathroom looks extremely tiny. I'm just wondering, what sort of size is that? Is there any space requirements in terms of bathroom facilities? Is it the real reason it's a shared bathroom is because the actual room itself is not big enough to put bathroom in it?
Yeah, I mean, bedroom 4 is 11.3 square meters in floor area. It isn't a large room. and the bathroom is 2.1 square metres, and it's essentially the same size as all of the other ensuite bathrooms that are provided with the remaining 6 bedrooms.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay. Chair, can I just come back on that?
Sure.
Yeah. So if you're lucky enough to have a room with an ensuite, at least you've got luxury of stepping out into your own private space to get dressed. But I can't imagine that little tiny bathroom on the landing is big enough, for you to get dressed and undressed, within that bathroom.
Okay, thanks for that addition. Paul Stuart.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've got to agree with Councillor Williamson with regard to the density of HMOs in the area. It was only a few months back that the committee agreed to rather large HMO on Brighton Street. Brighton Street and King Street are full of HMOs, and we as an authority, we have to have a policy with regards to these HMOs, because they are, I've said it before, they are tomorrow's slums today. And the questions that have been raised over the size of the bathrooms, the size of the bedrooms, the idea that residents on one floor is going to walk all the way up to the top and to use a kitchen at the top of the house is just ridiculous, in my opinion. So in effect, that place, the bedsit at the top is in effect its own flat, but it won't have its own fire escape. And these are the issues that I've got, and the comments that have been made, these HMOs are not going up in other parts of the borough. It always seems to be the less affluent areas, where there's less likely for locals to kick up a stink, and we are just cramming people into rabbit hutches. So I will not be supporting this application tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Steve Foulkes.
Yes, Chair. Clearly these are a bone of contention at every planning committee. We've recently done some work on the plan subcommittee to bolster what we thought were, inadequate policies to enforce HMOs to a certain standard. I think it's naive of anyone on the committee to believe that HMOs will go away. I have no idea what national legislation will do post-COVID-19. At the moment, there seems to be little or no guidance around anything around housing policies and HMOs. So my two issues are, if we were to measure this against the new policies we've done at the Plan Subcommittee, and I want a professional opinion, would the officers have come to the same conclusion of refusal and or our current policies? So if it's in line with our current policies and would feasibly pass any future test that we've currently look like setting, then I would be very interested in a reason for refusal. When we talk about over-concentration, I have seen some figures sent from Matthew. I don't know whether they were broadly circulated, and we'd need to know a definition of over-concentration if that was to be a reason for refusal. So we need some clarity and some science around that. My final question is one of concern, and I think it's been raised. The last apartment, which sits in the roof space of the proposal, does it have? It has natural light, I believe, from a dormer type or a skylight. Does it have a physical view from that? So what the theory, the potential of someone living in an apartment where they'd have to stand on a step ladder to look out the window doesn't seem feasible to me or encouraging of decent standards. So I'd be interested to know on what sort of policy lines we would be able to defend at a at an inquiry or more likely a written written appeal. So I'm just interested in testing against the policies we have and those which we propose. Would it still get approval? And this issue about the seventh apartment, which to me does seem to be a little bit out of order, put someone in the roof space. However, I go back to statements I've made about this. These are numbers of houses that are available to people getting on the very first ladder of rented or, getting somewhere to live. If this was a house occupied by 10 to 12 students, we wouldn't bat an eyelid. We wouldn't bat an eyelid if it was just a house being occupied by students by a university. But now it's got a HMO label on it. We are looking at it in very different terms, rightly so, I believe. So these are my sort of concerns about current policies, future policies. Would it pass the test? And what are reasonable grounds for appeal?
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair. It's difficult for me really to comment on our future policy because we've assessed and have had to assess this application in terms of our current policies around HMOs and the UTP. I think it's fair to say that the work that the planning subcommittee and the local plan is progressing would introduce a higher standard of accommodation for HMOs in the future. And I also think it's probably fair to say that if this application was brought forward at that point in time, that potentially we could be looking at a different recommendation. But we've had to assess it in light of our current policies and the standards that are set out in terms of minimum spaces for this type of accommodation. In terms of whether or not there's an over-concentration of HMOs in this part of Egremont or even this part of the borough, I did do some figure searching with colleagues in housing who maintain the register for HMOs with licenses, which of course they enforce. And there are currently 164 HMOs across the borough, which are for 5 people or more. And just to put it in context, Birkenhead and Tranmere have the highest concentration of those with 29. Rock Ferry has 27, Seacombe has 17, Liscard 16, New Brighton 20, Clawton 15, and then it goes down to 3 in Wallasey, 1 in Pensby and Thingwall, 1 in Leasow and Moreton East, and 1 in Heswall, 1 in Bebington. So, looking at that data alone, I think that there are some wards clearly in the borough who have got a higher proportion of HMOs of this size. In terms of this area of Egremont and this block on King Street, there isn't anything else within this immediate postcode or this immediate block that's contained on the register for 5 or more people, although there are a couple on the opposite side of King Street as you move further down. So hopefully that answers members' questions.
Okay, coming back on that, can I ask for
Department 7, which I referred to, the natural light or view to the street.
Yeah.
What does our policy say on that?
So in terms of the plans for the 3rd floor, so that's the area in the roof space. So the kitchen and living area are positioned at the front of the property, and they will be lit. That area would be lit solely by roof lights. The bedroom at the back would be contained partly within the dormer that has been constructed, and that does have a window that affords outlook and light into that bedroom. In terms of what our current policy in the UDP says, and that's policy HS 14, it does say that communal living space should not solely be lit by roof lights.
Okay, thanks for that. Mary Jordan. Mary.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of concerns regarding this particular application. Given the current situation we're living through at the moment, and I know it's not material to planning, however, perhaps planning will catch up at some point. But as Councillor Hodson alluded to earlier, the thought of people isolating in a facility like this, where they've got to share bathrooms or share a kitchen, really concerns me, particularly that roof space flat. The thought of anybody being stuck up there with no natural light for 12 weeks, I can't even begin to think how bad that was. And I know that it's similar to student accommodation. However, we sent all our students home as soon as this pandemic broke. These people would be stuck in somewhere like that. And I think it's totally the wrong message to be sending out to say that we would approve such an application.
Thanks, Mary. Kathy Hodson. Kathy.
Hang on. Right, can you see me now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Right.
Kathy? Are you there, Kathy?
Hello?
Got you now.
Oh, right. Councillor Sam Frost requested details of the length or the person would have to walk from the bathroom that doesn't have an ensuite to the toilet facilities, and it was 11 metres, sort of 33, 34 feet. And presumably the bathroom that isn't an ensuite could be used by anybody, any of the residents. I mean, can you just imagine in the middle of the night wanting to go for a wee and you've got to walk 33 feet and it might be in the dark because somebody switched the light off? Or you want to go to the toilet because that's your only facility, and somebody that's been in the dining room decides they want to go to the loo, and rather than go up to their bedroom, they go to the one bathroom, presumably, that they could get to, and the person whose only facility, they can't get to it. I just think, as Mary Jordan has said before, I think it's atrocious now that we even think of HMOs in the present climate. And I understand what Steve's saying, but we don't have to dumb down to the lowest common denominator, do we?
Thanks, Kathy. Can we take Ian Lewis?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Can I again thank the local ward councillor, Councillor Williamson, for bringing this matter out of delegation so that it can be considered before the committee this evening. I think some of the concerns we've had about 7 units, the comments in particular by Councillor Foulkes, let's not forget the original application was for 8 units within this building, so goodness knows what the living conditions would have been there had that been allowed. I think as a standard, I think it's pretty abhorrent. I think Councillor Williamson made reference to similar concerns. It's pretty abhorrent these days that we are approving applications that have communal areas for so-called personal space, whether it's a bathroom or a kitchen, notwithstanding the current situation that we have across the country and elsewhere. I'm concerned, like Councillor Williamson, about the impact this particular application will have on the EGREMONT community. As Councillor Williamson has said, there is a very strong community spirit there. I remember it from when I used to be fairly active in the EGREMONT area 10 years ago with one of the former councillors. The work of Egremont Voice since then to try and improve some of the communal areas has been noticed by anybody who travels through Egremont, as we do to the town hall, and I do feel this application will be a retrograde step. In terms of some of the comments that we've heard so far in the debate, Chair, Councillor Foulkes made the perfectly acceptable point that we would perhaps be naive if we believed that that we are going to see the end of any HMO applications. But I think we have to recognise the points that the planning officer made. On my calculations, that the figures that Matthew gave earlier means that there are at least 812 people currently living in HMOs across the borough, notwithstanding the point of Councillor Hodson earlier, if some of those people have doubled up. So we're looking at least 800 people currently living in HMOs across the borough, and that number is increasing. And that feeds into my wider concern that the demand for HMOs is partly a failure of some social landlords to meet the needs of some of the most vulnerable people on the housing waiting list or in our community. We know why HMOs are being provided. It's because the developers in most cases can make a quick buck, which answers Councillor Stuart's point about why they're always in the less affluent areas. They can buy up these properties that have been derelict, do a bit of work on them and shove as many people in as they want and get a whole load of rent or housing benefit or local housing allowance back. They're not buying up houses in Heswall or West Kirby or Hoylake to the same degree because they don't want the outlay. And for those reasons, Chair, that I've outlined and on some of the comments from other members, I will not be supporting this application tonight.
Thanks, Ian. George Davis. George Davis in.
Thanks, Stu. Can you see me?
Can see you, yes, sir.
And you can hear me?
And we can hear you.
Good, thank you. First of all, apologies for not coming in too early tonight. I was absolutely totally out of it from the computer. I've listened with great intent to what has just been mentioned. In particular, Ian has just made some very valid points, and Jeanette again made some very valid points. And one of the things that I just wanted, and I know where Steve Foulkes was coming from, because basically what he was saying was, if this, whoever the developer is that wants to develop this house in multiple occupation, goes back and says, well, I'm sorry, but I don't believe you're right. If you turn this down tonight, that's the point I'm making. Turn it down and it went to appeal. What are the chances of the appeal being successful? Well, I'll take you back to last year or the year before, 2 years ago, I think it was now, in the police station on Cllr Street. And that was half the size of what we're talking about here. Virtually half the size with the numbers that were also included in it. The biggest travesty to me, and I was doing housing for a long, long time, was when housing market renewal was stopped after 5 years of a 10-year programme. And unfortunately, part of where we're talking about now was the next part of the housing market renewal to be looked at. And unfortunately, what you've got left now is, and I think Ian's just made the point, I think that houses of multiple occupation are the last resort, the very last resort, because it doesn't give people, and Kathy Hodson made the point about the bathrooms and everything else, absolutely, I can agree with every single thing. But the big concern I've got is that these things go through, we're not doing anything. We are at the moment in the process of bringing in new policies. When we get them new policies, that should be to our favour. At this present moment in time, I don't see any way we're going to be able to stop it. But having said that, I think I'll be in favour of not voting for it.
Thanks, George. Okay, let me bring Sam Frost back in, then I'll try and put something in front of members arising from the discussion. Sam?
Thank you, Chair. I think I don't want to restate anything anyone said, and I completely agree with I think the consensus of points that have been made by all members across the debate. I'd just like to add a point. We talk a lot when we compare HMOs to student accommodation, and I think the point that's often made, and I understand it, is if students were in this accommodation, or if this didn't have the HMO title but it had student accommodation title, we might not bat an eyelid. And I do wonder whether we should actually check ourselves on that and whether that is the right approach, recognising that students and potentially people who are in HMOs might be in very different life stages, less likely to have dependents, etc. But I think if we're saying sometimes it's good enough for students and perhaps that should continue, I wonder if we reverse it and say, well, if we don't think it would necessarily be good enough accommodation for someone who might have a family or might be in an HMO, why would we necessarily consider it good enough accommodation for students also? They might be vulnerable people, they might be at risk, and they could also have kids with them. So I think just one for us to keep an eye on, that we aren't just saying students we'd accept it for. I don't necessarily think we should.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, hear what a lot of members have said. We do have an existing policy on HMOs, and in the past we've always insisted that it dots every I and crosses every T within that policy. And we've refused HMOs in the past and they've gone to appeal. We have a record on that. We've won some and we've lost some. Sometimes I just think it's depends on who the planning inspectors send up to look at it. I've been persuaded in the past to support some HMO applications based on the spread of facilities within the building. Mostly I tend to be happy if there's a bathroom, toilet, sink, etc. within the accommodation, that the kitchen is of sufficient size, and that the communal living area is also of sufficient size to accommodate the numbers of people that are likely to be there. And I've supported HMOs on that basis. An HMO at the end of the day is a household. It is one single household. It's its definition. It's just that the 6-7 people that will be in there will not be related to one another. That's what makes it, for legal purposes, a HMO. So when I look at the plans that Matthew put up earlier, I can see that most, bar one, of the flats do have some sort of ensuite facility, which is to the benefit of the application, and that the dining kitchen area on the ground floor looks to me to be of sufficient size to accommodate the 7 people that are likely to live there. However, when one looks at the what's called kitchen stroke living in the roof space, the 3rd floor plan, I can from the plans can only see one settee managed to squeeze in there, and this is the communal space that 7 people are going to be expected to occupy. It just, to me, does not look large enough to be able to take a communal living space for that number of people. Now, HS14, which has been referred to, requires properties to be of sufficient size to accommodate the proposal. Now, if we're going to accept that 7 unrelated people are going to live together in a house, then we need also to accept that there needs to be a kitchen and dining space large enough to take 7 people, and that there needs to be a living space large enough to take 7 people. And I don't think the one on the 3rd floor does that. Steve Foulkes raised the question, and Matthew quoted directly from our policy. Main living rooms should have a reasonable outlook and not lit solely by roof lights. Well, again, the living space on the 3rd floor fails on that count as well. Let me put into the chat box a form of words which I hope will find favour. I will move that the application is refused for the following reason. The proposed change of use to a house in multiple occupation is considered to be unsatisfactory and undesirable by virtue of the size of the property, which is considered to be insufficient to accommodate the number of units proposed and the requirement to provide a level of accommodation of modern domestic scale as required by policy HS14, paragraph 1. Furthermore, the proposed communal living space on the 3rd floor does not have sufficient outlook and is lit solely by roof lights, contrary to policy HS14, paragraph 13. The Council also considers that the proposal fails to provide a high standard of amenity for future occupiers as set out in paragraph 127F of the National Planning Policy Framework. So I'll move that. I'll bring Ian in a moment, who's indicated he'll second it. I've heard what some members have also said about concentration of HMOs in a particular area. Councillor Stuart was quite right. We did discuss that in relation to another HMO in the area, and I don't think we really bottomed out an adequate definition of what we meant by that. So that's why I haven't included that within the body of what I'm moving here. So I'll just bring in Ian, who's indicated he's happy to second that. Ian Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to second the refusal of this application based on what we've heard from Councillor Williamson as the ward councillor and other members of this committee.
Thanks, Ian. And any other members wish to comment now they've seen a form of words? I'm going to bring in Brian. Brian, try not to make your comments in the chat box. If you want to make a comment, I'm happy to bring you in to make it. Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, it wasn't really a comment, it's more of a question, because I know we've had many debates in the past about the whole question of HMOs, and I know the way the discussion appears to be going is that the general view appears to be that we should reject the application and support your recommendation. But my only concern is that we might go down that line tonight, but what I don't want to find is sometime in the future we lose the appeal, it costs the council money, etc., and the application eventually goes through. So it is a genuine question, and perhaps Matthew might be able to clarify as well as the officer. Are we confident that if this committee tonight rejects the application and supports the recommendation on the table, that we can uphold that at an appeal in the future? Thank you, Chair.
Yep.
Thanks, Brian. Before I bring Matthew in, I'll just say, as I think I said in my remarks, that we have refused HMOs in the past. Sometimes we've been successful at appeal, and sometimes we haven't been successful at appeal. We've just got to do what we think is the right thing and make the argument should it be appealed. In terms of costs, I'm not aware of our having any costs awarded against us for any of the appeals that we've lost on HMOs. But I'll ask Matthew, because you directed the question specifically at Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. I think the important things for members are, when you're considering moving against the officer recommendation, that you've carefully considered all of the issues, which is clear from the discussion that you've had tonight. And in terms of a cost award would only be made against the authority if the inspector felt that the authority had acted unreasonably. And my view is, I think, listening to the conversation that members have had tonight, that there's been a clear, a reasoned and a sound debate around the issues that are of concern to the members. And the Chair has put forward a reason for refusal that clearly references and identifies policy HS14 and the parts contained within that policy that specifically cause concern for members. So my view is that this has got as good a chance as any of being successful if it were to go to appeal.
Okay. Irene Williams.
I don't want to repeat what other people have said, but I just want to say that I'm totally against this application. I would vote for refusal for all the reasons that people have mentioned.
Thank you, Irene. Sam Frost.
Thanks, Chair. Just to pull a point, I think on, I think the comments that are being made are broadly in relation to HMOs of this nature, and specifically about this application. So I don't think, from the conversation that I've inputted into and heard, I don't think the stance is that it is no to HMOs forever. I think the direction is recognition that there are some times in people's lives where they require housing like this, but the idea isn't to say no forever, and that is the reason for refusal. What I'm hearing is the reasons I think are sound and based on the application at hand.
Thank you. That's my view. Okay, if there are no other, okay, let's vote on that then. If we get ready to vote, so voting will be for, against, or abstaining on the motion moved by myself and seconded by Ian Lewis. The solicitor will call your name to hear your vote. Please turn on your camera and mic before voting. Members should only cast a vote if they have heard the planning officer's presentation and the debate in relation to this matter in full and have not had any technical difficulties during this item. In the event that you have had problems hearing the discussion, you should not vote and indicate not voting when called. Okay, we can hand over to the solicitor to begin the vote.
Thank you, Chair. So we have a motion for refusal of this application, and I'll take a roll call per each member, and if you can say for, against, abstain, or if relevant, say not voting. So Councillor Berry?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Corkhill?
For.
Councillor Davies?
For.
Okay. Councillor Foulkes?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Frost?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hodson?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan?
For.
Councillor Kelly?
For.
Councillor Kenny?
For.
Councillor Lewis?
For refusal.
Yeah. Councillor Stuart?
For.
Councillor Whittingham?
For.
Councillor Williams?
For the refusal.
Yeah. That's unanimous. That's 14 votes in favour of refusal.
Okay, for the avoidance of doubt, that application has been refused. Well, that concludes our short planning agenda for tonight. Thank members for their contribution. We are next meeting as a committee on the 12th of May to consider 3 applications. See how we go with 3 applications. So before I close the meeting, I shall just read the advice that's in Ian Lewis's avatar there, given by the government during this pandemic. It's to stay home, protect the NHS and save lives. And I'll conclude the meeting at that.